So what is ethics? How many values and principles? This is the last aspect of our session today. And what's going on here is we're going to talk sort of practically for a little bit here in the end. And specifically, we want to talk practically about how many values we should sort of have in our mind to operate, at least to operate in the field we're interested in, which is computer science and information technology and artificial intelligence. Typically, just stepping back for a moment, typically people call that whole area of ethics, they call it AI ethics, artificial intelligence ethics. This is also new that it might change. Maybe in the future it will be called information technology ethics or something else. But for the moment, if you hear the term AI ethics, they're talking about that basket of ethical decisions and thinking that surround work in the area of information technology. And what we need to do to start actually doing that work and to begin actually doing ethics is we have to get a decision made about how many principles we are going to be putting in our mind and using to analyze what's going on and understanding fundamentally so we can use them. How many principles do we really need to work capably in the world, at least within the area of AI ethics? And obviously, there are extremes, right? You could say, well, we need just one, or we need a lot. And there are problems with the extremes. So let's just take one extreme. Let's just say we decide we're going to work with only one principle. And we'll say, no matter what happens, I'm just taking the principle of privacy. But it could be anything. It could be autonomy. It could be fairness. It could be social well-being, anything you like. But there's only one. There's only one principle. If you're going to say, look, we only need to know one principle, that's very good because it's easy to understand. There's just that one principle. But it's going to be so difficult to apply that one principle in diverse situations that the principle will become almost worthless. And the way I'm kind of showing that is through an example of a driverless car. Imagine you are trying to train, and this is very important, you are trying to train a driverless car to recognize a stop sign so that it stops. That's a big deal. You want that. You want the car to stop at the stop sign. And if you only use sort of one principle, which would be something like a mix of, as I'm showing here, a mix of white and red, that's not going to work. It's too broad because every time the car sees any kind of mix of white and red, like you see on the little cloud there, I'm not sure what that would be. That might be an advertisement for a dishwash detergent or something. Who knows, right? On a billboard. Every time the car sees any mix of red and white, it's going to think, stop sign, and the car's going to come to a quick stop, causing a traffic accident with everyone slamming into the car from behind, right? So if you have only one principle or too few principles, then the rules are so vague, so blurry, that they can't actually function effectively in the world. In the same way, if you just say that a stop sign is anything which is red and white, then that won't work for the driverless car. It will be stopping all the time. So you need more than one rule. Then you can go to the other extreme. You can have many rules. And in that case, it would be like the stop sign, which is the perfect stop sign, not the one with the gunshot on it. The stop sign with its perfect red and white, that would be the stop sign which is described by many rules. It has to have vitality, health, autonomy, privacy, dignity. Meaning something like this, it would be that the stop sign has to have eight sides perfectly, with each side perfectly as long as the other side, and there must be the perfect red and white boundaries exactly there, and the letters must be perfectly shaped, like the STOP, right? Something like that it would be a lot of rules. It has to have exactly this size, has to have exactly this shape. The S has to be exactly in this way, the T exactly in this way. Now, if you have a lot of rules like that, the advantage is that it will stop when it sees the perfect stop sign. It will work in that one case where every rule fits coherently and perfectly. However, the real world, we know, is not actually like that. In the real world, stop signs look like the other one I've put on the slide. Everyone seen that, anyone seen that, immediately recognizes, okay, well, that's a stop sign. Of course, I stop. But if you tell the car to only stop when it sees perfectly each letter, then when it sees the stop sign with the gunshot, it's not going to stop, right? It's going to say, look, that doesn't fit the rule. That's different than the sign I've been told to stop at, because the O and the P are imperfect. Plus, there's this other stuff up on the top here, which doesn't look like a clean line. So the car, in that case, the Tesla, let's say, will just zoom right through the intersection. And there again, you have an accident. So if you have too few rules, if it's too general, then the car will be stopping all the time for no reason, and you'll have accidents of rear enders. If you have too many rules, it's too specific, then the car will only stop in that one perfect case where there's the sign, but it will be going through all the other signs that actually stop signs that actually exist in the world, which are not perfect replicants of the sign, which is perfectly defined. So in that case, again, you have all kinds of traffic accidents. So for a driverless car, too few rules and too many rules both mean a lot of traffic accidents. You need to have just the right amount of rules. So it won't stop too frequently, but it won't stop insufficiently frequently either. And the same thing is true when doing ethics. If we have just one rule, it's too general, and it won't actually work in the world the way it's supposed to, because take, for example, the idea of privacy. Privacy does work pretty well when we're talking about those glasses that the Google guy was wearing. And privacy works pretty well when we're talking about the X-rays. But when you're deciding how fast to drive on the freeway, that's not really a privacy question, is it? And that's a question more about personal freedom and social well-being. So if we only have the rule of privacy, if we're trying to figure out how fast to drive on the freeway in terms of maximizing people's privacy, it's just not going to work. And we need more than one rule to cover all the experience that actually exists in the world. And then we could say the same thing again, if we have 48 million rules that we have to bring to bear on every single decision, well, then we'll never be able to make a decision, right? We'll have to analyze. I'm trying to figure out whether or not I should, let's say, going back to this example, I kind of like, someone gives me $20. I'm trying to figure out, of course, I'm not going to do this. I'm just joking. Someone gives me $20 and I'm trying to figure out whether or not I should give them an A in the class for that. Well, if I have to work through like 47,000 rules, let's see, does this help vitality? Does this help or hurt health? Does this help or hurt autonomy? If I have to work through all these rules, I'm never going to be able to make a decision, yes or no. Right? In order to actually make a decision in the world, I need sort of a limited number of rules to work with. Privacy is probably not going to be one of those rules because it's not really a privacy question. It really fits with fairness. If someone gives me $20, the reason I would not give them an A for that $20, they might get an A because they do well in the class, but the reason I would not give them an A for the $20 is because I have an ethical rule of fairness, which is that all the students should be treated equally. And so in terms of the work they do for the class. So the $20 doesn't help. So the set of rules that I want are going to include things like privacy and fairness so that I can get have different tools to use to work on different problems. But they're not going to be so many like we see on this side of the slide that I can't ever actually make a decision. I can't ever get going with anything because it just in practical terms, it won't work. So I think I've explained theoretically this kind of nuts and bolts problem that exists in ethics, in AI ethics, and in all ethics. It is how many principles should we bring to bear generally upon our problems. When we decide to gather together and talk about ethics, we have to decide first how many principles we're going to have on the table That's part of the discussion. Can't have too many, can't have too few. And here's another example. It's the same point being made again in terms of computer science. This is where you're trying to train a computer to distinguish, let's just say, cats from dogs. Cats would be the circles and dogs would be the squares. You want to make a rule that is not a crude, simple rule that ends up mixing up a lot of cats and dogs. But the rule can't be too perfect either for the specific training set, because if it perfectly identifies every cat and every dog in a specific training set, as soon as you leave that training set, as soon as you get new stuff in the world, like new stop signs, the data is not going to work anymore. What you want in order to have a machine distinguish well between cats and dogs is you want it to form a general distinction, like this middle view, which more or less grasps the key characteristics of most dogs and most cats. When you have that, then you can take that out into the world and it will work pretty well. Not perfectly, but pretty well. And it will work better than if the rule is too general or too specific. So the problem you have with driverless cars is just like the problem you have with AI identification of cats and dogs, and it's just like the problem you have with ethics. You can't have too many rules. You can't have too few rules. You need enough rules so you get some good, precise distinctions, but you also need not so many. You have to have kind of flexibility within those rules. So if that's the background, how many rules should we have? You can tell from what I've given you so far, it seems like most of us who are involved in this think we should have more than one rule and less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, less than 30 or whatever number that is, somewhere between 1 and 30. And what most of us in the community think is that the number of rules should be about 7, 8, 9, something in that range. And I have here a few different examples of ethics guidelines for artificial intelligence, which have been produced by different bodies. One on the extreme is the Data Ethics Commission from Germany. You see that they proposed 7 rules that should be the basic ethics values that are brought to the table when people talk about ethics. Their theory is that with these 7 tools, we should have enough rules that are few enough so we can use them, but not so few that they're worthlessly general. So 7 rules is their set. The ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI that was produced by the European Union, their number is also, it's kind of 7. They have some like diversity, non-discrimination, fairness, human agency, and oversight. It's not sure if that's 1 or 2, but it's kind of in that range, right? They're both about 7. We have in this class, or in this seminar, 9. The reason we have 9 is because what I have done is I have gone through and looked at things like the Data Ethics Commission of Germany, the Ethics Guidelines for Trustworthy AI, and a lot of other sets. And I've tried to find, I think I can say confidently that I have found 9 of the principles that recur in almost all of the sets. Some sets have a few more than 9, some have a few less, but if you just look at these 2, the Ethics Guidelines for Trustworthy AI and the German Data Ethics Commission, both of them have self-determination or autonomy. It's just different words. Self-determination is the same as human agency, is the same as autonomy. The ethics guidelines by the European Union does not have dignity, but the German group does have dignity, so we added that. Everyone has privacy, so that's there. The ethics guidelines have fairness, but the Data Ethics Commission does not have that, oddly, so we have that here. The EU, does not have solidarity, but the Data Ethics Commission of Germany does have solidarity, so we have that here. Sustainability is another way of saying societal and environmental well-being is another way of saying social well-being. That's really the same thing. The Data Ethics Commission has democracy as a value. That's probably because of for historical reasons and Nazism and so on. I think that, well, I don't think I know that democracy does not appear in all of the guidelines, so I think we can leave that out. That doesn't mean that democracy is unimportant. It just means that it's part of a different kind of study. That's much more about political philosophy than it is about AI ethics. Then we have performance. That's one that is here, but not in the other two. It does exist in other sets, however. Safety is the same as technical robustness, and safety is the same as security. And then explainability is the same as, explainability is the sum actually of transparency and accountability, but that doesn't appear in the Data Ethics Commission. In any case, the point I'm trying to make here, what I'm trying to show you, is that these 9 principles, which are the principles we will be looking at, these 9 principles are a good estimation of the core set of principles that more or less most all of the people who are doing AI ethics practically out in the world, in cases like I worked on with the COVID case in Brescia, most people who actually have experience doing this have found through their own experience that about 9, 7, 8, 9, about that number, maybe 10, the ethics guidelines, if you break it all up, it might be 10 or 11, but somewhere around 7 to 11 principles is about what you need to work efficiently but completely through the kinds of ethical dilemmas that arise in AI ethics. And so that's what we will be doing in this seminar. We will be looking at these 9, which, as I say, are representative of the core set that exists, that appears over and over again in the literature. Okay. So I think that's probably enough for today. What we have done is we have talked about what the definition of ethics is. And I think the kind of the fundamental human part of that is this idea that it's a language, right? It's a way of talking about privacy and freedom as opposed to volumes and inches and incentives and costs. So it's a language. And then secondly is this idea of evaluation. You cast everything in terms of their intrinsic value. What is this set of Google Glasses worth in terms of human privacy, in terms of human freedom? That's the second step. And then the third step, ethics is about privileging values, saying, look, this privacy is worth more than freedom in this case, or in this other case, freedom is worth more than privacy. And then only then do you say something is right or wrong. So that's what ethics is. That's the definition and what it looks like to work with ethics. Then we talked a little bit about this unique question of ethics and law. And we didn't come to any conclusion, but we said you can think of ethics as being an extension of law or as independent from law. And then the last thing we did is we looked at the kind of nuts and bolts of ethics and said, if we're going to be talking about these human values, if that's what ethics is about, then we've got to know how many should we talk about and what are they? And that's, again, what we did here. At the end, we said, this is the number we should talk about, and this is what they are. I will give you a few minutes just to think for yourself about whether or not you think that number is a good number. And I think that's enough for this session.